This is a impulsive stream. Very impulsive. I don't know why exactly. I just felt, I don't know, reflexively wanting to vent for a second. Maybe it's the pepper jack. So I've been thinking the last couple of days off and on about the riots, the protests, the demonstrations, and so on going on in regards to the murder of George Floyd. And Satsu has described this quite well in that the combination of people involved in the protests and or the riots, depending on what you're talking about, it's not a binary, there's good guys and there's bad guys. There's the peaceful protesters and there's the rioters. There's a whole bunch of different motivations, a whole bunch of different agendas, a whole bunch of different actors in this whole thing. You know, there's some people who believe, and I agree, that peaceful protest may be a way to change people's minds about something. And then there's people who believe that the more effective way to protest is to act violently. And then you have actors in there who are just out for their own personal gain, as in using the cover of the protest to rob or steal or just cause destruction. And then you have some anarchist elements coming in that just want to screw stuff up and also try to piggyback on the situation as a means by which to force their own political agenda. You know, try to frame the thing as some kind of revolution or something. And they're all so certain in their motivation. And some, I'm sure, and depending on the circumstances, I might agree with them, believe they're on the right side of the argument. But what is driving all of this, whether you're an anarchist or someone rightfully and peacefully protesting, or someone that thinks that the way to bring about change is to cause destruction because nothing else gets attention and so on? It's this inherent need in all of us as human beings to be a part of something greater than ourselves. You know, because we none of us want to be alone, right? I mean, that is the worst possible fate for anyone, to be alone in the world. And so in the absence of not being alone, well, how do you remedy that? You become part of something greater than yourself. You know, part of a movement, part of a philosophy, part of an ideology. And it feels good. It feels good to have a purpose. It feels good to have a support system of some kind, you know. And I don't mean to denigrate righteous causes for change in people's lives, like the civil rights movement or something, is just inherently a self-serving endeavor. But there is an instinctual need in all of us for companionship, for belonging. And there's nothing wrong with that. But depending on where that need falls, it can be exploited. It can be twisted into something and used towards something that is not productive. Or you can be tricked into believing that you're doing something good when you might be doing something that's counterproductive. It's hard to suss that out in this situation because, like I say, the protests and the riots are a massive soup of different people with different agendas. And even if you can draw a line between two individuals as being part of the same mindset, their inherent and individual motivations are going to be vastly different from one another. So, you know, why is it that people are so desperate to be a part of something that they'll sacrifice their critical thinking skills. I mean, is that need to belong so overwhelming that you'll set aside thinking about the bigger picture or thinking 3 steps ahead of what your actions might actually result in? Is it a reflex of youth and a lack of experience or perspective? Probably a combination. I mean, I've always wanted to be part of something larger, right? I always thought it'd be cool to be part of a secret society. Right? You see those in movies and things, and it's always kind of cool. And ever since I was a little kid, I was like, "Ooh, yeah, be part of a secret society with passcodes and rings and secret hangouts and stuff like that." Not for any particular end, no political motivation or some kind of overall agenda, but just to be part of something that was, tangential to the rest of reality, more or less. And for a time, I guess I had that to an extent when I was part of a LARPing group. I mean, it was a subculture of a subculture. It had its own lingo, its own terms. You could tell if you were talking to somebody whether they were in just by making certain references to things. The phrase retcon, I heard that amongst my peers in the group at the time, long before it became sort of common parlance. And a whole bunch of other things that are just like gamer related. And it felt good. It felt nice to be, outside of my normal life within this relatively cloistered society or community, to be someone at least seemingly of significance. That in the rest of the world, maybe I was just another schmo. But over here amongst this group with its own customs, its own language, its own terms, and its own sort of structure, I could be somebody important. Feeling like you're somebody important is a real driving motive for a lot of people. And I understand it. Don't get me wrong, I understand it. But and maybe this is a condescending viewpoint towards people in general, but it seems like that need, that desire to be part of something, to be part of some kind of movement or change, or to be significant in history, to leave your footprints in the sands of time, it can be so easily exploited and manipulated. A lot of the protesters and even some of the rioters, I'm not going to give too much credit to the rioters, but insofar as their motivations, some of them, the peaceful ones especially, I have no doubt that they have all the good intentions in the world. All right. And the road to hell is paved with such, but all the same, I don't believe all of them are inherently bad people, or they're inherently going out there to harm people, even if the collateral effect of their actions actually ends up harming more people than it helps. But I don't know the answer to it. I don't know. I empathize with the need to feel like you're making a difference, that you're leaving a mark on the world in some way, that you're leaving something more than simply existing in the world. Just to bring it back to me, because, well, why not? I'll talk about myself. I kind of see my YouTube channel as that to a certain extent. I mean, in my real life, right now at least, I'm not influential. I'm not significant to anything in the real world. I do my job, and right now I don't really come home from my job, but for the sake of argument, I do my job, come home at the end of the day, and kind of go about my business. I do the show every night, Lords of the Night, just because I plug it reflexively, as a matter of catharsis for myself, to keep myself in the loop on things. And honestly, because at this stage of the game, my online life, such as it is, is more significant than anything in reality that I'm doing socially. I try not to take it too seriously. I try not to take too much in life seriously. I spent too much time stressing over the little things in my insane anxiety years, and I try not to do that as much now. Life's too short, etc. And I really don't want to spend any more time stressing over things that don't deserve it than I have to. Do I feel like I'm part of something bigger? Yeah, to a certain extent, you know. The people who watch our stuff, the people that I've connected with as a result of the channel or the show or side projects and things like that, the relationships, feeling like in some small way for the long term, I'm leaving something behind of myself, even if it's just slices of audio and bad editing in videos that I do. The thing is, it only lasts so long as YouTube lasts, or my channel is allowed to exist, I suppose. I think I fly relatively under the radar when it comes to that. But yeah, maybe it's a midlife crisis thing. I just recently turned 41, so technically speaking, I guess, given the average lifespan of your American these days, I'm at the midlife part. What is my what's my the same old question. What's my purpose? What am I leaving behind? What am I doing? What am I producing? Am I making any changes? Am I improving anybody's life? Am I doing anything significant? I have a hard time giving myself any credit for anything. So, but watching all these people just, and as abstract as it is, I'll set aside the people who are actually being peaceful, who are actually trying to, without harming anybody else, get a message across or try to push for change or whatever else. Whether you agree with it or you think it's misguided or whatever, if you're doing it peacefully, more power to you. But watching all of the destruction, watching a whole bunch, do you think anybody's going to remember the name of the person killed during the protests? I mean, right now, for the moment at least, we all know the name George Floyd, right? How many people thus far, whether they're law enforcement or just innocent bystanders or whatever, have lost their lives or have had their lives completely destroyed as a result of this, that we'll never know the names of? Do their lives not matter? Do their fates and their future and their family and their ability to make a living not matter? We'll never know their names. You may be able to find them in a news story here or there, but they won't be nearly as famous as George Floyd, even though they're, in a lot of cases, just as innocent, just as uninvolved in the circumstances that led up to their fates. So what really does matter in all of this? What really is the point? You're going to give all those lives and crimes and everything a pass because it just happened to take place during a protest against something that everybody agreed was an injustice. This is the thing. This could have been a completely unifying moment if you really were looking for change in things. You had Sean Hannity on the same page as Rachel Maddow, for crying out loud. You watch that video, there's no gray area for any reasonable person. That guy was killed on camera. He was suffocated to death. He had a knee on his neck for 7-8 minutes or whatever. You had a unifying moment, an unfortunately, tragically unifying moment. And what do we get at the end of the day? Well, we're right back to partisanship. We're right back to drawing the lines between one side and the other. So status quo all over again. Might as well. There are 8 people, according to StreamYards. The pepper jack's talking, guys. 8 people watching me right now. Babble on and on. So I'm going to go over to the chat for a minute. I didn't intend to make this a long stream or anything. Just kind of a ramble. Let's see. This is Kyle, says hello, Scribe. Hello, Kyle. Richo8181. Hello, Scribe. Hello, Kyle. Kyle. Boy. Tell you what, I am a cheap date. Tell you what. Richo, hello. Shrouded Angel, hello. Gayest person on YouTube, hello. The Babylon Scribe. Yeah, that's me, the Babylon Scribe. Let's see. This is Kyle says, the answer is definitely not to riot. It doesn't help the message. As far as I can tell, the riots are actively counterproductive to the actual issue involving Floyd. Yeah, I don't see how burning down buildings and ruining people's livelihoods and victimizing countless other people furthers a message of unity, peace, or change. All you're doing is rightfully wanting people to have more law enforcement come in, more control over the situation. Now, I've seen some tweets today with people saying something to the effect of, everybody wants us to act like Dr. Martin Luther King, and he got killed. I'm like, okay, his assassination and the way in which he tried to affect change are two separate things. Nonviolence, passive resistance, making an example of the people who are oppressing you and not making yourselves an example of what people don't want to see. That is what people are talking about. They are vilifying Martin Luther King because he was assassinated. I've seen several messages like this deriding what Martin Luther King stood for and what he affected as far as change. And it's just bizarre to me. It's absolutely bizarre. I mean, there are plenty of things to criticize the temporal plane versions of Martin Luther King or Mahatma Gandhi, etc., about them as individuals and their behaviors as human beings and so on, certainly. But their methods for affecting change, nonviolence, passive resistance, and so on. I mean, Gandhi moved the entire British, empire. Martin Luther King helped to shutter through legislation past a decisively racist president in Lyndon Baines Johnson. These things are effective, but you have to stick to them, and they're not easy. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it is reflexively against human nature not to try to defend yourself or strike out when you're being unfairly treated and so on. But it's a powerful message when you end up being the better person than the person trying to oppress you. But riots don't show anything other than criminality and the peaceful, innocent, uninvolved civilians surrounding it wanting order back to their lives and safety, and not feel like they are under threat or their families are under threat or their livelihoods are under threat. If you turn yourself into the villain, you're not a hero. I really don't get why that is so hard to understand. But what do I know? Corey Suzuki, hello. Attack Alpaca, hello. Gareth Calhoun, hello. Quinn the Cultist, hello. Did I get the Calhoun part right? I always get proud of myself when I can read a last name or a word that I'm not entirely familiar with and still pronounce it correctly. Yeah, I could tell a story, but I won't. Let's see. This is Kyle. One is not related to the other in the way they want it to be. Like I say, I don't think all of the people rioting are inherently villains. I think the results of their actions are obviously villainous and destructive. Their motivations may be well-intended, but that doesn't excuse hurting innocent people. destroying property. And this argument that, oh, we have to hit them where it hurts in their pocketbooks or something, in their bank accounts. And it's like, okay, well, if you bust through a Starbucks, I hate to tell you this, there are a lot of Starbucks out there. And so far as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, they are all corporate owned. So you bust through one Starbucks, there's 3 more 4 blocks away, and the corporation's not going to be hurting from that. You bust through a mom and pop, you bust through a franchise, all you're doing is hurting an individual or an individual family. You're not harming the corporation. You're not sending a message to the big wigs or anything. The only message you're sending is, boy, oh boy, I better not open up a business there anymore. Or my entire life savings is gone now because my franchise or my business is now burned to the ground and I have nothing and have to file for bankruptcy. I mean, it doesn't take much brain power to think about the reality of the situation and understand that there are more effective ways to affect change if you're looking to do that. And of course, that only applies to those who think that, oh, I would be a peaceful protester, but the only way to get attention is to be violent, versus the people who are just out there to cause damage because the opportunity presents itself. And these are 2 distinctly different groups of people. The problem is you can't tell the difference because a car being on fire is a car being on fire. A business busted into is a business busted into. The end result is the same, even if your intentions are meant to change opinions versus just fuck shit up because you can. A little bit of foresight, a little bit of forward thinking on a lot of people's part, I think would help quite a bit. But then when you feel like you're right, you feel like you're righteous, you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself that you have to push forward no matter what, when you feel like you're a hero, in our heart of hearts, all of us want to be the hero. We all want to be the person who saves the day, the person who does the right thing at the right time. It's in every part of our mythology, in our media, comic books, legends, and so on. You want to be that person. You want to be the guy who shows up at the right time and does the thing that saves the day. I get really emotional over acts of sacrifice, whether they're real or fictional. If I'm watching a movie and I get that, there's that moment in the movie where the hero or the side character makes the ultimate sacrifice or risks their lives to save somebody else, even if it's completely unearned, for the most part. Or as an example, Iron Giant. Okay, at the end of Iron Giant, and I won't completely spoil it if you haven't seen it, but I recommend you see it, there is a moment where there is an act of pure, true self-sacrifice. And no matter how many times I've seen that movie, at that moment, if I've watched the movie all the way up to that point, I start getting emotional. I start getting teary-eyed. I'm not going to deny it. It always hits me every single time because I appreciate that. Part of me wants to be that kind of person. I don't look forward to jumping onto a live grenade or anything, but there's a certain level of aspiration in me to be the kind of person who, when put to the test, would do something like that. Myself versus the greater good and so on. I think that is a powerful instinct in a lot of people. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And so I can understand that. I can empathize with that motivation. I can't agree necessarily with the way it's expressed all the time, but I can empathize with that. So in some maybe distant way, I feel like I can kind of understand where a lot of people are coming from and what they're doing right now. But that's about where it ends. As soon as you do something that's going to harm someone else or simply break something to break something, you lost me. As soon as you do something for your own personal gain, whether it's stealing something from a store or breaking something because it feels good, not because it accomplishes anything, but because you want to feel like you're putting it to the man, when in the grand strokes of things, you're not doing anything. You're just adding on to an insurance claim. That's it. So I don't know. I just got a little maudlin for a minute, a little bit introspective. Thought I'd rant, thought I'd vent. Virgil Grin, hello. Twisted Skipster, hello. Twisted Skipster says, at this point, I would love to be the hero that destroys humanity. I am sorry my kids have to live in this. No, you see, at the end of the day, the better angels of all of us far outnumber the worst. For all the stuff that we're seeing in multiple cities right now, the number of people who are actually intending, or just by their own sense of righteousness, ending up doing damage to other people is a small segment of the rest of us. Most of us are rearing back in horror, or keeping to ourselves, or staying away, or trying to do something more productive. So I haven't lost complete faith in humanity, because what I'm seeing, I just consider that small percentage of human beings that do the wrong thing at the wrong time. It's always been so, and it will always be so. And anybody who claims that they have some solution for solving the worst that humanity has to offer itself is lying, or offering some kind of snake oil. There will always be bad actors. There'll always be bad ideas and bad decisions. But at the core, I believe that most people understand harming innocent people and breaking things just to break things doesn't improve anything. Really doesn't. If you want to change things, vote, lobby, petition, make an argument that convinces people to come onto your side. That's what I do all the time with these TEDx's. It's like I'm looking for somebody to change my mind. I was thinking about this earlier. Like, why? And I've talked about this on the TEDx's before, but like, why do I bother subjecting myself to all of this nonsense? Well, honestly, it's because maybe, possibly, I'll come across something that isn't nonsense. I have had my mind changed drastically so many times in my life by one example, one argument that has shifted my perspective on people or the world or whatever else. I'll give you two examples, if you care. I've told this story before, I think. Someone from my past, like in high school, junior high school, later in my life, just by coincidence, I ended up working at the same place that they were. And out of the blue, without any prompting or anything at all, I didn't even know at the time that they recognized me. I recognized them, but I wasn't sure that, given the number of years that had passed and everything else, that they would even know who I was. And they came up to me unbidden and said, I can't quote verbatim, but they said effectively to the extent of, hey, was I mean to you in junior high? Because I was a really bad person back then. So if I was ever mean to you, if I ever did anything terrible, I'm sorry. Right? And it was one of the most profound moments in my life. Somebody changed. You don't see that very often. Someone profoundly changed. They look back on their behavior and the kind of person that they were, and they wanted to make amends. Honest, unsolicited, pure amends for what they'd done wrong or what they felt they'd done wrong. And even though I recognized this person, even though all my memories of this person prior to that point were sour at best, as soon as they came up to me and apologized, It was all gone. It was all forgiven. I wasn't even like a conscious thought in my head. It was just like, wow. And so that one act completely changed my perspective on life, on people in general, on the potential for people to change, whether it's myself or someone else. Right? I mean, that's the most singular, profound example of how someone can change my mind and alter my worldview with one single act. A slightly lesser example, I suppose. This is a few years ago now, but there was a video that Vernaculus did. And if you guys don't know who Vernaculus is, you can look him up on YouTube. I think he still has his channel active. He's at least still active on Twitter, although I think he stopped making videos. Anyway, he had a series of videos for several years. And there was one video, and I couldn't find it if I was asked to find it at this point, but there's one video of his where he argued about the Second Amendment. And he argued against the notion that the language of the Second Amendment is antiquated or doesn't apply or needs to be discarded or whatever else. Now, for the longest time, when I became sort of politically conscious, and this is after 9/11, because I think a lot of people found their geopolitical consciousness after 9/11. My overriding opinion of the Second Amendment for the longest time was, this is antiquated. The language specifically says it is for a well-armed militia. It is not intended that it applies to, Joe Schmo. Everybody should own a gun and so on. I wasn't some kind of virulent anti-Second Amendment sort of protester or something, but that was my general read on it. And then I saw this video by Vernaculus where he goes over in the dumbest simplicity of it, the actual text of the amendment. And he points out how it very clearly says the rights of the people shall not be infringed. And the people has nothing to do with specifically a well-armed militia. And in that moment, from that single video, that single argument, which, if it's just a reading of the text, it sounds very simplistic, but that's what did it for me. I was kind of like, he's right. He's got a point. In law, by the words, it allows for it. And my opinion on Second Amendment arguments against the antiquated nature of the language and so on completely changed. I mean, I'm not a gun guy. I'm not a gun enthusiast. So it's all very relatively abstract to me. But as far as like arguments against the amendment as being completely worded a particular way or it doesn't apply and everything else, went out the window at that moment. And so I don't make that argument anymore. I used to. I don't, because it was pointed out to me. You know what? So I can have my mind changed. I am glad I can have my mind changed. So I force myself every other day or so now to marinate in ideas that, at least on the surface, I might reflexively disagree with. On the off chance, maybe a good argument will come my way. Maybe a good counterpoint will come my way. I like having my mind changed. I don't like feeling as though I'm a completely static creature, that I'm incapable of evolution of a kind. It's boring, It's actually kind of unsettling to feel as though I'm set in my ways and cannot be swayed. I don't like that feeling. So if someone's got a good argument, I'll entertain it. Whether I'll accept it or not depends on the argument. But anyway, I'm starting to peter out. Just thought I'd vent for a minute. Twisted Scripture says, dark from the dawn of man. Oh, sorry, not other dark. From the dawn of man, it has been, give an ape a stick and they will kill another ape. All major powers have fallen the same way. No one learns. People don't change. It is sad. I don't agree. People do change. People can change. It takes an effort. It takes a conscious, introspective effort. People can change. That person from my past who came up to me, I should say. Like I say, unsolicited, unbidden. I didn't even let them know that I recognized them from the past. And they knew who I was. They remembered me. And they had an instinct that they had mistreated me in the past. And they made amends. You know, and I've seen that same kind of behavior in small ways and in larger ways from many people over the course of my life. I've seen it in myself, you know, where I can recognize where I did wrong. And even if I can't make amends directly to the person or persons that I slighted in my behavior, at the very least, I can do everything I can never to be that person again. Because I know it's possible. I've seen it in others. I've seen it in myself. You know, there are a lot of things about humans that'll never change. There are very few stories that haven't already been told when it comes to human behavior. But people can change. It's just a decision they have to make. It's a choice. So, anyway, for those of you that joined me for this little rant, or anybody who might be listening in the future to this, thanks for popping in. Given the current circumstances, I hope you are all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon. As a secret preview, for those of you who are here who care about my TEDx talks, I've got a couple in the queue at present. So here's a sort of free preview. I've got 2 lined up. I've got one that says, From Proximity to Power. And the only reason I picked this one is because proximity is a buzzword that I've heard several different times in relation to things that always make me kind of go, I don't know anything else about it beyond that. So it, like a couple of the previous TEDx's, is a complete mystery box to me. And the other one, which sounds a bit more leading in its title, but we'll look at it anyway, Bringing Justice to a Colonialized Self. Justice, colonialized. Yeah, it's always the buzzwords that grab my attention. So again, I don't know the ultimate content of these talks, but over the course of the next couple of days, I will cover them in some way, shape, or form, granted that work and timing line up. But anyway, all of you, 14 of you, at least by the count of StreamYards right now, that are watching, listening, those of you who are visible, those of you who are lurking, thanks for stopping in. I don't know if this was any use to anybody. It's mostly just me venting because the world has gone mad and I've got no control over it but to just sit back and watch and hope for the best. As always, thank you for listening.